But yeah, so we're recording. My name is Jeff Middleset. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Sustainable Enterprise.
Hi, I'm Tracy Trix Matthews. I'm the Associate Director in the Center. And yeah, we're very excited to have the third in our series of sessions with experts.
Yes,
So
this is a very exciting one, as were all of them. And so I'm going to hand it over to Arvind Chari, who's from Quantum Advisors, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks, Tracy. Welcome, Aarti. So before we begin the session, so just a recap of what we're doing for Aarti's benefit and also for the students here. So now as the students have registered for the India Impact Challenge, they'll have to submit sometime in the next week or 10 days. And so this is a kind of a pre-submission series of interviews that we've done. So we started off with Bittu Saigal on Wednesday. We had Jyoti Pandey speaking on air pollution and different insights and what different solutions she's seeing in the air pollution space. And today we have Aarti Khosla. People who haven't seen her earlier interview, please go on the website of the India Impact Challenge or the Quantum Advisors. We covered a lot of ground. We started asking Aarti with that moot question, the main question of the Impact Challenge itself, which is India ground zero for climate change? And and she took that question. We spoke about the things, the movements that is happening in India in solar space. So we are trying to move away from thermal and coal and gas, from fossils onto solar. It's a long road ahead, but very interesting, very encouraging signs there. And then I asked her about the proverbial question, right? India needs to grow. People have aspirations. Is there a dichotomy between that growth and aspiration and climate? And of course, Aarti's answer was very, very clear. That's not. We have to do it together, and both of them are possible. So today, Aarti, since we've covered all that, what we would want from you is, this is a recorded session, so students are already here, and then many will see it later. In your interactions, in your experience, in your interaction with people who work in climate, the government, public policy, corporations that you work and advise with, what are you seeing? Like, are you seeing encouraging signs? Are there new technologies? Are there new ways of financing? Any aspects of related to climate change, which you think is very, very exciting and is scalable, and something that can be a lead into the students who are looking at their own business competition and business cases, if they can get some few ideas from you. So that's the idea, 15-20 minutes of your talk, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So Aarti, your time. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody, and thanks for having me here. Thanks, Arvind, for the background. I will start by just laying the context in terms of how some of the actions are both necessary as well as are happening and underway. So it's not really a futuristic scenario, but there are some things where the train has left the station, so to speak. It's only a question of scaling those technologies up, because that's also the overall policy direction in which the government is going. And I will explain a little bit about that as well. The climate debate is very political as well, as much as it is technical and scientific, which means that while the rationale of doing what needs to be done is very scientific, the will to do it is largely political. And therefore, what can happen depends a lot on big decisions that get taken on international negotiation processes, as well as national level of decision making. But ultimately, how that will break down at the local level, the regional level, the state level, are all things to keep in mind as the decisions aggregate up to what we call as a decarbonized economy. I must say that there are several ways to deal with the climate impacts. One theory says that you plant 1 billion trees and you can sequester that much carbon, and therefore you can keep the planet green and clean. But there are other equally relevant and more pertinent stories which say that the scale of the impact is so much that you cannot achieve action at the scale which is needed by not actively mitigating. So I'm going to focus the rest 10 minutes, so to speak, on the big lever that can be put on mitigating emissions, which essentially will take care of more than a quarter of the climate change problem, so to speak, and will be able to give results. It's also quite uh, I think it's also in the context of what the group here would like to listen and talk about, because when we're talking about mitigating, then the discussion can really be about what are the new technologies, what are the disruptive technologies which can be of interest to both investors as well as policymakers, so that what happens in the next 10 years is not incremental but radical. And I think pretty much more than anything else, the climate conversation is really, really begging for radical action and not incremental action, and which is why the need to discuss some of the past technologies which have not worked, but some of the new technologies which will rise and shine in future. I will talk about a few things. I know that you already had a conversation to talk about air quality, but maybe I will describe it a little bit more, especially in the Indian context, where most of the Indian cities come on top of the pollution index. There is definitely need for scalable ideas on neighborhood air monitoring, for example, which means that the democratization of data, and to make sure that in a city like Mumbai, you just don't have 20 monitors which are installed by the regulatory authority, but you can have even 200 monitors which measure air quality in a very hyperlocal environment. The value of this work is that we have seen in other countries like the US, even across Europe, in Germany and a few others, where a lot of relevant local campaigns and even public movements have built when people have been able to measure the air quality that is in their neighborhood, which is different from me just being able to see what the air quality is at a monitor which is 5 kilometers away. And it feels that having invested some time in the air quality campaign in the last 4 years, there is certainly a lot that is brewing in terms of developing low cost sensor based devices, putting them at unique places like a DTC bus in Delhi, the Delhi Transport Corporation bus, putting them at few locations like a hospital or a health center in, say, a coal mining area, or even putting them inside houses of Delhiite, just to see how there is difference in the air that people are breathing. And in the end, it nets out that whether you are in a lower rung of the socioeconomic pyramid, or you are in an elite setup, the exposure that you have to bad air pretty much remains the same, which means that air quality has been that equalizer. So to that extent, the first of the ideas that I wanted to talk a little bit was just the tech and the investor community to be able to think about broad basing the air quality campaign, so that we are able to see some quick gains. And the way to do it is to be able to measure it effectively, because as most scientists say, if you can't measure it, you can't rectify it, which basically is part of the problem. And to be able to collect useful data on air pollution, which has become quite an important thing. And as some of you are also aware, as you see, at some important forums, the Prime Minister has alluded to it. He talked about air pollution problem in his Independence Day speech and several other platforms. And it's a problem which is too hard to ignore. And it feels that, there is a need to have some solutions, because several people have highlighted the problem, but definitely there is a need to suggest some solutions. And maybe the first step is to democratize the availability of data in the first place, and to empower communities, neighborhood colonies, societies, schools, hospitals, and so forth, to be able to demand clean air. Because certainly the government will have to act if they feel that the pressure is not just because they have to act, but there is also a pressure from the public movement to deliver. That's one thing. Shifting gears slightly, but mostly related, is the whole conversation on electrification of transport and the focus on EVs, electric cars, electric two-wheelers. I'm not an expert on EVs, but I do want to stress that, especially when you're talking about scalable technology, maybe it's worth talking about what are modes of electric transport, because whether or not it's about climate goals, it's certainly about having a cleaner and a decongested city to live in. And even to that extent, the role that can be played by having less petrol and diesel and less internal combustion engine vehicles on the road. The future is clearly electric in a lot of countries, mostly in Europe. A lot of the new fleet of cars is already electric. Understandable that in India it will be 5 or 10 years before that fever can catch up, but definitely it's better than it was in the last 2 or 3 years even. For example, it's quite clear if you do the maths that the 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 cost of buying a two-wheeler EV is already competitive than buying a two-wheeler conventional two-wheeler. And therefore, the more there is better technology available, for instance, at least in cars, it feels like, especially after the pandemic and the way the auto sector was impacted, EVs have taken a slightly backseat simply because it's not possible to be promoting a future technology when you want your inventory to be consumed in the first place, which is fair and fine. But certainly, in terms of a future vision of India, a future vision of how our cities should look like, there has to be more electrification of transport per se, and and it's not about encouraging cars alone. It's basically about finding the right balance so that there is public transport and as well as private promoted at the same level. It's not just about promoting private transport. I don't want to enter into the ideological details of this, but as an impact investment idea, it feels to me that talking about better electric vehicles in the context of cars can be a big aspiration shift, especially for the middle class Indian mindset, where it's always about owning a big car, owning a powerful car. And EVs fit the slot in a slightly different way, but I think it needs to be more mainstreamed. And certainly there is a role for better technology, longer range with the battery, so that the anxiety that customers have that I will buy a car and it will run out of battery and there will not be enough charging stations. I think those are useful. Those are right concerns that consumers have, but there is a role for the investor community as well as the technical community to be able to take charge a little bit and advance the coming in of EVs, so to speak. It's quite inevitable, but definitely there is a way to advance it a little bit. A lot of states have policies on electric vehicles already, but just to be able to give it the right push. Even today, we have quite a few EVs. I live in Delhi. There are EVs flying with Tata Nexon, a few others, but more brands, more models, and just better technology as such, so that the range issues are solved and the battery charging issues are solved, and it's easier as a consumer to be able to own an electric vehicle, will be quite game changing just in the way how cities will look and feel. And I feel that's one thing to talk about. Two other things I will discuss in terms of what I think are important, and one is slightly technical, but let me address it. And whenever we are talking about climate change, we are talking about, of course, we are talking about emissions, and we are talking a lot about the three big hydrocarbon fuels: coal, oil, and gas. And whatever can be done in terms of taking the share of coal, oil, and gas away, the better it is. Part of the solution, which a lot of experts recommend and is necessary, is hydrogen, which means that you use hydrogen as a fuel, which means that there are several ways in which hydrogen can be obtained. You can obtain hydrogen from methane, hydrogen can also be obtained from coal. But normally, the best kind of hydrogen which will be obtained so that it doesn't add to the warming potential will be through electrolysis of water. And it feels that those kind of technologies where green hydrogen, as it's called, becomes more mainstream, will certainly go a very long way in helping heavy industry, especially the cement and steel sector. Those are, again, big decisions that have to be taken by big industry, big corporation, top level decision makers in the government. But the fact is that there is staggering amounts of fuel that is being used by our industry. There is huge amounts of coal consumption by thermal power plants, and even without that, all the manufacturing industry is using enormous amounts of fuel, whether it's gas or oil or coal. And the fact that there is a need to replace the hydrocarbons with something which is less emitting, hydrogen offers a very easily available, but also a potentially transformative application. But there are challenges that need to be overcome. So again, I'm not an expert really on the technicalities, but I do feel that with the amount of effort that is needed by the industry sector to reduce their emissions and the amount of energy consumption by the industry sector, unless this is not addressed, we will be only touching the tip of the iceberg. And it's important for the industry sector to take charge. So that's another thing. It's kind of handling uh, both issues of power consumption as well as transport, because hydrogen as a fuel can be used in running a manufacturing unit, but it can also be used to run trucks and cars and planes and ships. In cars, experts say that it's not very wise because the vehicle itself is small and it's an expensive proposition, but certainly can be used for heavy duty trucks and freight vehicles and so forth. And these are all things which don't come into everyday view of our line of sight, but certainly there are things that need to be done, maybe which will bring one third of the emissions cut already in terms of the full view that was needed. So I'm also trying to propose some of the things which are big chunks, and when done well, they can handle like a substantial percentage of the emission profile. And my last point is something that everybody talks about in the context of reducing emissions and the fact that there is a rise in renewables. I haven't touched on it, but I think it goes without saying that the way solar and wind have gone and established themselves as viable energy producing sources, they're no longer alternatives. Very soon, they will be quite mainstream. The question really is, what do you do with coal power plants which are already existing? But that's a separate big question. What I wanted to discuss is that if you have so much wind and solar in the mix, then these are intermittent in terms of their energy supply. They need storage, and the climate community is discussing a lot in terms of what is the key milestone in the energy transition pathway of the world. It's not going to be easy, but key key milestone in the energy transition pathway mostly is to be able to have backup, which becomes very important. And that backup can come from a good battery system. That's the best way to do it, which comes with a lot of added benefits in the way that if you have a good battery which can store the energy that has been generated by a solar panel in the day, then you can enhance the stability of the grid which is transmitting that energy. You can play solar and wind along with the coal power plant. You can ensure constant supply of electricity. You can make sure that the energy that is generated from renewables is not wasted because it's always stored. And all of those issues which explain how the best case scenario for the world as well as for India is to ramp up renewables like solar and wind, but to do that while being able to find what is that disruptive technology in battery. And this is really my last point, but I feel that if the world, and it's not me, that's what I've picked up in various the views of the experts in the climate community, that driving the driving force for what will bring game changing impact on how energy is consumed and produced is the battery technology. And right now the costs were quite prohibitive till last year. Now the costs for battery have come down substantially, but even with that, it is still not at a stage where battery is the preferred option either for cars or for solar and wind plant, though hybrids are coming up. And I think I just want to close by saying that the more that is done in the battery technology space, the faster that it is done and the more cutting edge it is, the more impact it will have. And that's where I also feel there is a lot of interest of the investor community. There are big players like Tesla setting gigawatt of, type factories in a lot of countries, and China is really leading the race on that. And I'm just wondering that India, with its big initiatives on self-reliant and make in India, a lot of the discussions that I have done in the last 10 or 15 minutes quite fit in the slot of ramping up manufacturing, ramping up technical expertise, ramping up innovation. The government is focusing a lot on startups and the medium and small enterprises, and a lot of all this discussion of new tech, new thinking, and accelerated action on climate change fit into many of the initiatives and efforts of the government. I will pause.
Aarti, thanks. That was wonderful.